Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, positive people. What a great crowd we've got. I've lost a bet, by the way. I bet Bridget Charlton, who is the brilliant marketing person with Clive, Owen & Co., that we would have fewer people come than we expect, and we've had more. So there's a bottle of Prosecco for you. All right. Thank you all for coming, and it's great to see so many positive people from Tees Valley coming to our budget briefing today. And you know, part of that is also it's being delivered by a positive firm, Clive, Owen & Co. I've been involved in different ways with Clive, Owen & Co. for 25 years, and this is a firm that has just grown. It's ratcheted up, it's grown with Teesside's business community. It started in Darlington by Clive Owen himself. A lot of people in this room will know Clive. It's grown now to 3 branches, Durham, York and Darlington. It's got 12 partners, nearly 110 staff. It's worked with growing owner-managed firms in Teesside. If you can look at the practice and the number of clients it has, and then how those clients have grown and the number of jobs that have been involved, you can see that this practice has been involved in the beating heart of our economy for well over 25 years. And I want to thank Clive Owen LLP for organising the event, and also to thank our Mayor, Ben Houchin, and Peter Gibson, our new MP here in Darlington, who are very busy and they're giving the time to talk to us today. So today's agenda, in a moment, Alan Moore, the Senior Tax Partner at Clive Owen LLP, looking at some of the key highlights in the budget that you might have been interested in from a business point of view. Then Peter Gibson, Darlington's newly elected MP, and then Ben Houchin. They'll all say a few words, and then when Ben has finished speaking, we'll get them on the panel here. They're all mic'd up, and we'll get some questions from you. So think of some questions. I've got a roving microphone, and we'll look forward to it. You can ask them anything they want. They'll be ready and waiting to give you whatever answer you need. There are no fire alarms. I know we've got VIPs here, it's not that bad. There are no fire alarms due. There's an exit at the back, there's an exit at the top. And also, if you've got your car here at the hotel, you need to register it so you don't get a parking ticket, and there's a registration at reception. And obviously, I think everyone's been very good and not been shaking hands because we want to keep everything nice and sanitary today. And you can see we've even placed the chairs a little bit further apart. It feels a bit odd not shaking hands, but we're all obeying the rules. So let's kick off. Alan Moore is the Senior Tax Partner at Clive Owen LLP. Alan, come and tell us what you think the highlights are.
I'm not going to talk about coronavirus. I'm not going to talk about the government spending plans. What I'm going to talk about in the next 5 minutes or so is just some of the key issues which have come out of the budget. Budget highlights. Well, one of the big ones was the changes to the Entrepreneurs Relief Rules. The limits have been reduced from £10 million down to £1 million. So it's a big change. We were expecting change, but I don't think people were expecting it to go straight down from 10 million to £1 million. Having said that, the capital gains tax rate hasn't changed. It's still, a maximum of 20%. So, if you're an entrepreneur selling your business for £10 million, okay, you might end up with a £900,000 extra tax bill, but it's still going to be reasonable, given the, the overall capital gains tax rate. The Structures and Buildings Allowance, this is kind of the replacement for something which used to be on the statute book called Industrial Buildings Allowance many, many years ago. When Industrial Buildings Allowance first came out, the companies who would be building new factories, extensions to factories, etc., would have got a 20% initial allowance and then 4% per annum writing down allowance. Industrial Buildings Allowance was scrapped a number of years ago and is now being gradually brought back. So it's got a different name, Structures and Buildings Allowance, and what it gives is the company who's having a building built at 2% per annum, going up to 3% from the 5th of April or 1st of April for companies, extra tax deduction. You know, it's very welcome, but I don't think it's going to cause a great stampede for people to be building new factories and, you know, putting, you know, extensions on, etc. Research and development. This increase in the RDEC scheme rate from 12% to 30% is very welcome, and I think what it does do is it underlines the government's commitment to R&D generally. There's been no change to the 130% uplift that small companies get for their R&D expenditure. You know, that remains the same. The 12 to 13% increase in the RDEC will be, you know, mainly appreciated, I guess, by the larger companies. But it's, you know, it's good news. The pension tapered annual allowance. I guess these changes to the rules were sparked off by hospital doctors, I think, complaining about, you know, if they've been asked to do extra shifts at the hospital, the tax implications for them, if they were at the, you know, the £150,000 limit, were such that, you know, they wouldn't be left with very much extra in the pocket after paying the tax. So what has happened is that the government have increased the limits, and they've pushed the adjusted income threshold up to 240,000, and the normal threshold income is being increased from 110 to 200,000. That's going to, I guess, you know, sort of please the people in the, you know, in the hospitals, the doctors, etc. What it means is they can, you know, do some extra work. I guess we're expecting that in the ensuing months. They're not going to be overtly penalised through the tax system. The knock-on effect of that is that it helps many other taxpayers who were previously caught by the taper relief rules. You know, they're going to benefit from that. So I guess the richer members of society will be able to, you know, put some more money into their pension schemes and get some additional tax relief. Business rates. The big changes really were for properties with a rateable value of less than 51,000, the retail discount was doubled from 50% to 100%, and the scheme was expanded to include hospitality and leisure businesses. So that would be, you know, cafes, and I think cinemas is something else which is on the list. So that's very welcome. The business rate discount for pubs has been increased to £5,000. So again, you know, that's going to help them out in what's going to be a challenging few months for them going forward. And basically, you know, these changes are welcome, and the business community, I think, can take some comfort that, you know, they're going to be left with a little bit more in their pocket, you know, at the end of all of this. They're going to be facing some challenging times, and you know, every pound counts. The budget itself, there wasn't a fat lot in it. We've kept the rates of tax, the main rates of tax, capital gains tax rate I mentioned earlier, that hasn't changed. Corporation tax is still staying at 19%. The income tax rates and personal allowances, etc., you know, have remained as before. But the devil is in the detail. There is a number of measures which, you know, haven't mentioned today because of time constraints, which are covered in our budget booklet that you should all have copies of on your chairs. So I'll wrap that up now, and I'll now pass on to Peter Gibson, who will give his insight into what the budget means for business in the North. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Conservative Darlington. I've been looking forward to being able to say that. Day 93 in this new job, and let me tell you, it has been an amazing 93 days. And to sit alongside our neighbouring MP, the new Chancellor representing a northern constituency this week, was a huge privilege. I think Rishi Sunak has done an amazing job in a short space of time delivering the budget that he did in terms of what is going to be an incredibly challenging time for us economically with coronavirus. And he started that budget speech setting the tone that effectively everything that the government can do and will do and should do to deal with that problem from an economic perspective, he will do. So I think we can be reassured from that aspect of the budget that the support that we need for our towns, for our businesses, for our communities, for our National Health Service is there. It's been a huge week for the North. In terms of my local takeaways from the budget, Darlington train station. I know Ben's been campaigning long and hard for the investment in Banktop Station. If you haven't seen it already, I will encourage you to go and view Ben's Facebook page with his whiteboard vision of what it means in terms of increasing capacity. But it's a huge investment that will unlock an immense amount of capacity, both for trains travelling north to south, but also for transport throughout the whole of the Tees Valley. So that was a big takeaway. I was delighted to see Darlington mentioned not once, but twice during the budget speech, and if you haven't seen it already, I was able to ask the Prime Minister a question about Locomotion 1 immediately before. If you haven't yet signed our petition to save Locomotion 1, can I please encourage you all to go and do that, and encourage your colleagues and staff back in your businesses to do so. It's hugely important that that icon of this town is saved. So if you can get on board, excuse the pun, to help save that, I would appreciate that. For me as well, the rates relief that is coming for leisure businesses and retail businesses is a huge boost to our town centres. None of us can be unaware of the challenges that our town centres face as many more people move to online shopping, challenges of car parking, etc. And many town centre businesses are really struggling. So I was really encouraged that help and support for our town centre businesses, not only retail but leisure as well, is there. So I think that's a huge takeaway, a real boost for us, and together with the plans that we have in terms of bringing more investment to our town centre through the Towns Fund, bidding for other funds for redevelopment of our town centres, Ben's plans for reducing car parking charges throughout the Tees Valley, which Darlington will benefit from, will be hugely beneficial to us locally. And we need to also all vote with our feet. If you're shopping online and you can buy it in the town centre, please come into Darlington Town Centre and buy it here in Darlington Town Centre. We can all help those businesses ourselves. Check in online, share your story about having shopped in a local shop to encourage others to do it. We need to help support those businesses in our town centre. I believe that this budget was really about backing business. I think it's fantastic news that the Chancellor's backing increases in research and development tax credits, more funding for startups, huge benefit of employing veterans. Many of you who know me, that I ran a law firm before getting this job, and I employed a lot of veterans in my business. And if you haven't employed a veteran, I can wholeheartedly encourage you to do so, because you get so much out of them. They follow the rules for a start, so that's fantastic news. They're used to discipline, so having policies and procedures in your business is great. So I hugely welcome the changes to the national insurance rules to encourage people to employ veterans. And being as close as we are to Catterick, there is a significant proportion of our nearby community who, when they leave service, are looking for employment locally. And so I'm immensely proud that Rishi has done that to support the people in his constituency, which Catterick is in. But that will also benefit businesses here in Darlington too. Green issues, top of lots of people's agenda. We're going to see the plastic tax, and I think it's about time that we did see that. We need to reduce our reliance on plastic, and it might very well be a stick rather than a carrot, but encouraging us to change our habits about the packaging that we use and making better choices. This is obviously the stick, so I wholeheartedly welcome that. Many of you will have seen the net zero Teesside launch a couple of weeks ago, and the backing for carbon capture and storage that was in the budget is another huge advantage to the Tees Valley. We're leading the world once again. We're doing something really clever, really innovative that we can sell our story about, and that's just fantastically powerful. There was more rollout of electric charging, so if you're taking advantage of those tax allowances on your company vehicles already and you're driving a Tesla or a Mitsubishi Outlander, the ability to charge in more places will be fantastic. And then the level of infrastructure spending, this headline figure of £640 billion that's going to be spent over the course of this next Parliament on road, rail, schools, hospitals. Hospital spending's going up. We've already enshrined in law that extra £33.9 billion that was promised in the manifesto, and the budget this week announced a further £5.4 billion for our National Health Service. These are incredible numbers, but in terms of capital investment, 640 billion, that's going to truly transform our transport and our infrastructure in this country, and that's really to be celebrated. In conclusion, this is a budget that I believe delivers on the Conservative promises from our election last year. It responds proportionately and with adequate resources to the crisis of coronavirus, and I believe it delivers for Darlington. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and it's great to see Peter elected. He's a friend of mine, but a friend of business as well. He knows a lot of people in the room, and being an accomplished professional before he took his position as MP will certainly help him in the network that he needs to get the business advice. Now, I want to introduce somebody now who is what Radio 4 described as the most powerful elected Conservative politician in the Northern Powerhouse. Somebody who has reshaped our area, not just in terms of our economy, but in terms of our politics. Somebody who has not just come up with compelling and attractive ideas, but has delivered on those ideas. Somebody who has an exciting and relevant agenda for the future, and somebody who has persuaded the government in this budget to act and to invest. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Houchen.
I'm still inclined to shake hands at the moment, Graham. No, thank you for that introduction. And I just on that point that the Spectator came up with, I can never figure out whether that was a compliment or a slight when they said I'm the most important politician that you've never heard of, actually was the quote. So I think it was probably more a slight than it was a compliment. And before anybody asks, Peter and I have not coordinated ties. It is just a genuine coincidence that we decided to put our bright ties on today. So thanks for coordinating on that one, Peter. I just want to touch upon a few minutes because everybody said the more important and more detailed things about the broader budget. I just want to touch upon what this means for the Tees Valley area, including Darlington. And Peter's touched on a bit of it, so he's probably stolen some of my thunder, but I'll just go over it. A little bit. Again, from the budget's point of view, if you do read a lot of the national papers, you read a lot of the national commentators, everybody is now saying that Teesside is absolutely the winner out of this budget, and it can be clearly seen with the investment that we've got. And given the incident that we've had with the coronavirus pandemic and the way that that is developing, what it is absolutely true to say is that this budget wasn't the budget we were all expecting, and probably was scaled back significantly on the levelling up agenda because of the crisis that we currently face and the precautions that have to be taken, which is why if anybody watched the budget, you saw it split into two parts. And I think had coronavirus not happened, had it not happened or happened as it did, then actually you would have seen the full thing being about the levelling up agenda. So I think what the marker in this budget was from Rishi Sunak was absolutely a marker in the direction of travel we want to see, but there's more that needs to be done, and I think we'll see a significant change depending on what happens with the corona pandemic as it develops over the coming months in the spending review, which will happen September, October time, and then the autumn statement, which is going to be happening at the end of this year as well. So I don't think we can stand here and pat ourselves on the back and say, look, it's great, we're starting to level up. We are just at the start of that journey. We've made some good progress, but there's a huge amount more that needs to be done. And one of the things that we are absolutely a winner out of the budget on is Darlington Station. And one of the messages that it's very difficult to get through, and I'm quite proud of my video on Facebook, so if anybody sees it, it's quite a good wipe. I think it's good anyway. Go and have a look and tell me whether you think it's not, or whether it is. But when we talk about Darlington Station, what we're not talking about is a nice new shiny building at Darlington. The actual facade and the structure of Darlington Station is amazing. It's a listed building and it should be retained. What we're actually talking about is big infrastructure investment, which is why I think probably I'm aligned quite well with the new Prime Minister as a former mayor himself, to understand that that kind of money going into Darlington Station, the whole project's going to cost £105 million. We'd already committed 25, and it meant that the government had nowhere to hide when we went and asked for the balance, and they came up with the other £80 million. And it now means that for anybody that's ever got one of those rubbish pacer trains over the last however many years they've been on the local network into Darlington Station, we all know that it parks up right in the middle of the station, right between the northern and the southern East Coast main line. Now the problem with that is, and it's quite a technical point, but it is the point that is, it's kind of this idea that where devolution does take over, because nobody in Whitehall would ever come up with this, it's local teams, local people that have done it, that when you do that, you have to cut across the East Coast main line on platform 4 going south. Now what that means is it automatically limits the number of trains you can run on the local line, because the East Coast main line, as the LNER trains come flying past, takes priority. So it means those local trains have to stop whenever there is a mainline train coming down the track. So that means there's a reason we have, at best, a train every half hour coming into Darlington Station from across the Tees Valley area. Now that's the thing, that's the cork in the bottle that stops us from putting more trains on the track across Stockton, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool and Redcar. So the plans and the money that's been invested will build a brand new local station on the side of Darlington Station, where the pay car park is as you speak. When you come up the back ramp where the taxi service drop off, the car park on the left-hand side. The plan is we will build a brand new station on that car park. We'll build a multi-storey car park as well, so there won't be any net losses of car parking spaces. And that will mean, from a track alignment perspective, it means that you'll no longer be parking in the middle of what you know as Darlington Station. Before it gets to the East Coast Main Line, there will be new track that will bend off and sit in what is called the local station of Darlington Station. Now, Darlington Station is the gateway into the Tees Valley when it comes to rail travel, so it's absolutely something that needs to be done, and it's something we should be proud of when we're trying to attract clients and business to this area. If they're going to get the train up, Darlington Station is our kind of first port of call of the impression of the area when they get off, so it absolutely needs improving. But on top of that, it means, from a technical point of view, if you want to get on a train in the Tees Valley at the minute, like you say, you can do at best one train every half an hour, so 2 trains an hour. By doing that, what seems like a small piece of work, but trust me, when you work with DFT and Network Rail, it is a long and arduous piece of work. It means that you can go from 2 trains an hour up to a theoretical 8 trains an hour, going right the way through Thornaby, onto Redcar, onto Stockton. It then unbottles the problem of having to change Hartlepool into Middlesbrough into Darlington, because again, even though Hartlepool doesn't have a direct train into Darlington, it means that you can't run as many trains on the Middlesbrough-Hartlepool line because of the bottleneck that Darlington causes. And it just goes to show, when you get into the detail of this, just what a mess the rail network is, because everything has an impact on everything else. But this is the first step forward of big investment in infrastructure, and that will be finished. That will be finished by 2024, and it will be in use by 2024. It will all be built, and in the coming months we'll be on to the construction phase, where we get into the nice nitty-gritty of actually creating some construction jobs, bringing more money into the local area and all of those other associated things. That's fantastic. And then the other side that came forward, as well as Darlington Station from a transport perspective, and Peter touched on it very briefly, a couple of weeks ago, some people will have seen that once we did the deal on the old Redcar Steelworks site, now we've taken back control of the whole thing, and we managed to strike a deal with the banks and SSI. A week later, we announced what was Net Zero Teesside, which is the world's first, genuinely the world's first, industrial scale carbon capture and storage scheme. Now, for those of you that, many of you will know, but for those of you that don't know, it's in effect, it's going to help decarbonise and take out a huge amount, 6 million tonnes of carbon every single year from our chemical and processing industry. Because when we've got this 2050 net zero target that we have to meet by 2050, one of the things that often goes unsaid, especially in the north of England, is the potential impact that could have on existing jobs. It's all very well and good talking about decarbonising the economy, but you've got to pair that up with technology, innovation, and making sure you're protecting existing jobs. Because I often say when I come and speak to people, and people in this room have probably heard me say this before, I say quite flippantly, you know, the Tees Valley area has done extremely well in cutting its carbon emissions. We've cut them by more than 50% in the last 5 years, but it's very easy to do when you close the steelworks and put 3,000 people out of work. And if we're going to hit that 2050 target of being net zero as a country, one of the things that we've got to be very aware of as a region is protecting our chemical and processing industry, because of that industry, we are still the second largest carbon emitting region in the whole of the country. And what this facility does, that will cost somewhere between £4 and £5 billion just to build, on a 125 acre site, just to the south of where the steelworks is, on the steelworks site. In effect, very simply, and this is overly simplifying what is an amazing project, it's like sticking a massive exhaust into the chemical and processing industry. So instead of all that carbon being emitted, it gets captured by the exhaust, pumped into this technology, and then the carbon gets buried under the North Sea, 2 miles under the North Sea, in the North Sea caverns. So that's the equivalent of 2 million homes a year being completely net zero carbon producing homes. And that's all happening in Teesside. It is the world's first of its kind, and it's being run by what is now a rebranded Net Zero Teesside, and it's a consortia of all of the world's largest oil and gas companies. It's your Eni, BP, Shell, Total, Equinor, which were Statoil. They're all funding a huge amount of this, and one of the things that came out in the budget, which was a big, big tick for us, it was about the government also backing that project as well. And we are now in discussions with government, as it was announced by Rishi only the other day, that we will be probably one of two. There may be a third, but it's more likely to be one of two clusters that develop this technology. We're absolutely the first, and it will be the first to happen here, but the Humber are also looking at, they're behind us by a couple of years, but they're also looking to explore this, and we are now going to get a share of £800 million to be able to get on with that project. We won't get it all, but we'll get a significant slug of it. And it just goes to show that type of investment in low carbon technologies does cost a lot of money, and it's going to be a partnership between the government and the private sector partners to be able to deliver that to fruition. So you can start to see the budget is just the start of that journey about levelling up, infrastructure investment, rebalancing the economy, all of those things that us Conservatives tend to say, especially with Boris Johnson in charge, the levelling up agenda, oven-ready projects, all that kind of nonsense. But it is just a start. It is just a start, and we need more. So we'll continue to press in the spending review for obviously fairer funding for local councils, a huge review of multi-year spending by government as well. And then towards the autumn, the last thing I just want to touch upon, because no doubt we will get a question on this, is free ports. And getting a free port or a free zone in Teesside can absolutely say we're at the front of the queue for this as this policy progresses. But the reason it wasn't announced in the budget is ultimately it's just too early, because whatever you want a free port to look like is entirely dependent on our end relationship with the European Union. So we will know by the end of the year, probably in the autumn statement, what our hopefully, touch wood, what our relationship is going to be like with the European Union, and that will allow the government to start to make more significant announcements about where the first free ports are going to go, because I do know that the government are intending to have the very first one up and running by May next year, May 2021. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll go into a bit more detail, but thank you all for coming. I think it's a great start for our local area. We're always going to want more, as Peter's always pushing and I'm always pushing. The North always needs more. It needs its fair share, and I think we're starting to see that, but what we need to do is capitalise on what is, I think, a fantastic opportunity at the moment. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben and Peter and Alan. Would you take a seat on the panel there and watch the chairs don't tip over the side? It's quite a narrow stage. We don't want any accidents, particularly when there's cameras here. Right, so time for asking questions. If you want to start us off, I'd be very grateful. Any starters? We've got one right at the back. I bet this feeds back. Here we go.
Hello. In the budget they talked about the Northern Hub for the Treasury. Have we got any information on that? Like the location it's going to be? Is it going to affect Teesside, or got any further information?
Good question. Ben and Peter.
Could you repeat
the Northern Hub for the Treasury?
Treasury jobs.
Where will it be? Could it be here?
Let's hope so. I am at every opportunity with every minister I end up sat next to in the Commons or in the tea room saying this is where we need to be. It needs to be in Darlington. We've got the connectivity with the airport, thanks to Ben. We've got the connectivity with the trains. We've got the connectivity with the roads. I can think of no better place than that being sited here in Darlington, and I continue to press that case on behalf of the town.
No, Ben, obviously it's going to be in Darlington, but...
So I've been speaking to Rishi about this for some time. It is something that's very personal to him as a policy. It wasn't really something that was dreamt up by government. Rishi has been talking about this since long before it became public. And there's two reasons for it. One is it's a visible signal of the rebalance of the economy and actually showing that things are coming outside of London, which is symbolically quite important. But the second thing, which is much more practical and actually much more exciting, is the reason he wants to do it is because he wants to get the people that work in government, especially in Treasury policy development, out of London. Because they're all good, everybody in the civil service, we're all individuals, we're all good people. But when you are from, the Treasury officials especially, from the south, worked in London your whole life, it does, even subconsciously, give you a slant on what the world looks like. And Rishi's very keen to say, well, if we're going to do this, we need to get a big chunk of the Treasury out of London. We need, and I've been very forceful, both with Rishi and publicly about this, it cannot go to a large metropolitan city, because I like Manchester, it's a beautiful place, but Manchester is not representative of the large swathes of the north of England. It is another metropolitan city. It does not reflect in any way the serious challenges we face as a region, whether it's through infrastructure, transport, education, and actually having those officials somewhere like the Tees Valley. And I've been very heavily lobbied by Peter and Heather Scott and all of the other local authority leaders as well, saying that they should come to Middlesbrough, Centre Square. There are some nice empty offices over in Middlesbrough. I think Rishi is, and given that he's right next door as well, he is very acutely aware that Teesside could be a very powerful message, both from a policy point of view and from a political point of view, for it to happen. So we're having continuous conversations about it. Things are going quite well. I actually just asked, I had my cabinet meeting this morning with all of the 5 leaders from the local authorities, and I've now asked them to go away and say, look, if the government want to do a transition, say in 3 or 6 months, that means they're going to need somewhere that's already built, obviously. So go away and show me your best opportunity for, if they want to be here in 6 months, where can we put them and where is actually physically deliverable and to their standard within the Tees Valley area. Because if they want a 2-year transition, we'll end up building them something. But we're now trying to rush around and say, right, we're having this conversation, Rishi, here are the options available to you, which one do you want? Now, I'm sure Rishi would say that he is looking at all options across the north of England, and there will be a consultation and there will be a process to select the most appropriate area, but we will continue to have those conversations.
Well, that's great, and I know that it probably will go to somewhere with a devolved mayor as well, because you can actually take decisions. Yeah, it should.
North of England, devolved mayor, not a major city.
Next question from the audience, anyone? Anyone else from the audience? Well, I've got a few that have been submitted in writing. One for you, Alan. How could I mitigate entrepreneurs' relief quickly?
Well, I think you've probably missed the boat. You should have had your transaction done before the budget date. But we're in the new rules now, or so we've got to think about perhaps reorganising the way that we run our business. We could look to introduce family members, because it's an individual limit, this £1 million. So, if you give your wife and kids some shares, well, you can be doubling up, or more than doubling up the reliefs that are available. You can look to, strip out, freehold property out of your business, put that alongside. It might make it a bit more attractive to sell and to maximise your entrepreneur's relief. So there's quite a lot of planning that can be done. But all this planning needs to be done well in advance of a sale. You know, it's not the sort of thing you can decide on, 2 or 3 months before you sell your business. You might have to do something 2 years before you sell.
You could always put the price up.
You can put the price up as well.
Okay, Peter, red diesel. That's quite a big job, isn't it? It's quite a big tax rise in a couple of years. Will it affect hauliers and people? Will there be enough time?
Well, it was important that they gave the allowance for the agricultural industry. Ben's right about tackling this carbon issue. We've got to do it. There are going to be some painful journeys ahead. I was delighted to see my lobbying for, and a number of other colleagues, for the fuel duty escalator being frozen for a further year, because that cost of fuel for many families is a significant portion of their outgoings. So I was pleased to see that. But we are going to see in the years ahead falling tax revenue as we switch to electric vehicles, and that money that the Treasury spends is going to need to be replaced from somewhere. So we're in those transition years, and I think this is probably the last year that we'll have had that freeze on fuel duty, and I think that we'll start to see that ramped up as we also see the incentives to move to electric vehicles increased.
By show of hands, how many people have come here today in an electric or hybrid car? One.
Wow.
I've got one on order. You've got plans to get more electric points in Teesside, and I saw that was also in the budget for more electric points generally.
Yeah, we're investing a huge amount to try and create hub centres that people can come to knowing that they're going to be electric charging vehicle points, and we're in some final discussions with government about hydrogen as well, because electricity and battery powered vehicles will not be the solution for heavy vehicles, trains, trucks, etc. Just because of the efficiency and the scale of the batteries that you're going to have. So we've actually just got a big grant from government to set up a hydrogen refuelling station for vehicles to test some of them, and we're in some final discussions now with government about, hopefully, fingers crossed, getting the UK's first hydrogen trains all starting in the Tees Valley. So all of our local trains, hopefully 8 an hour going to and from Darlington, will all be hydrogen powered, and we're in discussions to build what will be the world's largest hydrogen refuelling station on the old Redcar Steelworks site, so they can go into the existing infrastructure on the sidings there, refuel, and then come and shift people across the Tees Valley on a completely carbon neutral hydrogen train.
Yeah, it is mind-blowing. We've got one more question at the back, and then I know we're going to have to wrap because Peter has another engagement as well. So right at the back here.
I think we all applaud the short-term measures that have been introduced as a result in the budget for the virus. But isn't this an opportunity, do you think, and it's probably aimed at Peter, that we tackle the issue of late payment to suppliers? I mean, it seems to be an issue that goes on and on and on, right? And businesses are going to suffer short-term cash flow difficulties as the virus happens over the next few weeks and months. And I'm thinking of such initiatives such as encourage major supermarkets to pay their suppliers and their supply chain quicker. Okay. Also instances where the government is an employer and a customer, and when it pays its bills quicker, and makes it a condition that the supplier to it pays its suppliers, so the cash actually trickles down the system quicker, right? And that, I'm sure, would also go a long way to alleviate some of the short-term cash flow difficulties. But isn't this an opportunity to do it?
Okay, thank you very much, John. Late payment.
I think that's a really interesting point, and it's something that I will certainly take back and raise with ministers when I'm talking to them next week in respect of the issues that have come up in our respective constituencies about tackling the coronavirus. Can I just say this though, because I know we've got an audience full of business people here. It always surprised me as a lawyer how businesses didn't always take the tools that are at their disposal to enforce the late payment rules that are there and take action to actually enforce their own terms and conditions, whether they actually had proper terms and conditions. So the lawyer in me is saying, get some proper terms and conditions, make sure you follow the rules, enforce them, and take advantage of the rules that are already there. We've got quite a significant package of late payment rules and regulations there that are quite advantageous to businesses that are not receiving the money on time, but they're reluctant to do it because they're fearful of the impact that it may have on that relationship with that customer. Well, my view as a lawyer, my view as a businessman was that if you've got a business and you need money to pay your staff and pay your wages and pay your expenses, and you've got a customer who's not paying you, that's not a great customer. And I think many businesses are a little bit fearful of standing up to their customers and saying, you need to pay me. You've got some rules, follow them. So I will certainly take the message back. Government can do its part in making sure that it pays its suppliers. It can send out that message, and I'll certainly take that back next week. But you know, businesses have got plenty of tools at their disposal. Ring your lawyer. Ring your lawyer.
Thank you, Peter. We're going to wrap there because we've got a time constraint. I want to ask to conclude Rosemary Anderson, who is a tax partner at Clive, Owen LLP.
On behalf of Clive, Owen LLP, I'd like to thank everyone for turning up today. We are very much in unprecedented times, and we're not sure how people are going to respond, but it's so nice to see the good old British Reserve and to see you here today, so thank you very much for turning up. I was at a client meeting this morning. There have been a couple of quips about shaking hands today, and I was at a client meeting this morning, and rather than shaking hands, the client actually put their hands together like that as a recognition, and I thought how respectful that was. So maybe instead of shaking hands in the future, we'd be doing that to each other, which was very, very nice. As an outsider to the region, I found that highly insightful. I think we've got some very exciting times ahead of us, and I think that was very well put forward by you all, by our speakers here. So I'd like to thank Peter and Ben and Alan for speaking with us today. Thank you very much. On each of your chairs, you should have a budget booklet. On the back are our contact details. If you do have any questions regarding the information in the booklet, please feel free to contact us accordingly. And again, thank you very much for attending.